Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for May 2nd, Friday, May 2nd, 2014. Well, I just got to show you, number one, I'm shocked that this headline is above the fold in USA Today newspaper. GOP calls new Benghazi email smoking gun. And boy, I'll tell you, at least on this issue, with the mainstream media, the honeymoon is over. I mean, there are people on the White House saying, hey, whoa, 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 you said there was no conspiracy. You said there was no, the talking points didn't really mean what they said, that there was confusion. This smoking gun email basically was for her. It's for Susan Rice. I'll let it focus in here for you. Susan Rice, at the time, was the, ambassador to the United Nations, and she was being prepped for all the Sunday talk shows because, after all, our ambassador Chris Stevens in Libya and 3 other brave Americans were butchered, murdered. And what they said, what the Obama administration said for days after this attack is that, it's because of this anti-Islamic video. And there was a protest, and there may have been protests around the Middle East, but not in Benghazi. And there was a protest, and there was a spontaneous attack. False. There was no protest the night of the attack in Benghazi, which was September 11th, 2012. Imagine that. September 11th, 2012, and there's an al-Qaeda-linked attack. What they said was, it was the video. And the video, had, people, Muslims, angry, and and because of this video, they attacked the consulate and killed 4 Americans, murdered 4 Americans. False. Everybody knew the day it happened, the night it happened, from the CIA to the military to even, the number 2 in the State Department in Libya, Gregory Hicks, who testified in Congress. He was on the phone to the White House with his boss, Hillary Clinton. She was Secretary of State then and said, oh, no, it's a terror attack. I mean, the Prime Minister of Libya the next day, terror attack. Everybody said it was a terror attack. Leon Panetta, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he's the Secretary of Defense. Also, Dempsey, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, terror attack. Everybody knew it was a terror attack linked to al-Qaeda. It was not caused by a video. There was no protest. Fact. And now this email comes up, basically prepping Susan Rice for, make sure that, we show that the president's policies are strong, that, that this was linked to this video, and it has, that's basically what the prep was. That's what she did. She went out on the Sunday talk shows and said this attack was caused by this anti-Islamic video. Lie. False. President Obama did the same thing. He said it at the UN. He said it on talk shows that there was a video and that really offended people and they got angry and they attacked. No, false. Hillary Clinton knew. She was on the phone with one of her employees in Libya. She knew that night, and yet she put out a memo saying it was caused by an anti-Islamic video and that was a spontaneous. No, false, wrong. And, of course, she testifies in Congress later on and says, their famous quote, what difference does it make? Well, let me finish that statement for her. What difference does it make if I lied? What difference does it make if we lied? What difference does it make if the Obama administration lied to the American people about this attack? Listen, if they'd have come out early on and said, gosh, we missed this. We missed this. It was a terrible attack. We didn't see it coming. It was al-Qaeda. We didn't have enough security. We missed this. We wouldn't be talking about this now, but no. Let me tell you what I think this is. This is a cover-up. I mean, there's an old saying in law school, if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's a duck. Okay, this is a duck. This is a cover-up. This happened, 6 weeks before a presidential election. The president wanted to look strong. Never mind all the charges of gun running out of Libya to Syria, which we said at the time we weren't doing. But never mind any of that. This was a cover-up. And all these stories are coming out on both sides of the question here, all sides. And I got to tell you, even the mainstream media is not being very friendly to the Obama administration, but the far left media outlets, Salon and Huffington Post and whatever, they're coming out with, oh, no, this memo doesn't mean anything. Why are they doing that? And this is what this is really all about, and this is why. What difference does it make? And here's what difference it makes. Hillary Clinton is the front runner for the Democratic Party for the presidential race in 2016. She is the presumptive nominee for the Democrats for 2016. She's far ahead of the Republicans at this point for 2016. And they are circling the wagons to protect Hillary Clinton at all costs. And here's one question I have. So you have Susan Rice, who is the ambassador to the UN. Chris Stevens was Hillary Clinton's employee at the State Department, and he was murdered. Why wasn't Hillary Clinton on the Sunday talk shows? Much more is going to come out about this. This is a real story. It's not just Fox News. New York Times, ABC News, CNN, CB, other people are asking hard questions. Hey, this looks like a cover-up, and this looks like a cover-up. Although Jay Carney at the White House press secretary said, "Oh no, that memo wasn't about Benghazi. If it looks like a duck, and if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. Quack quack." The Ukraine crisis is getting worse, and there's all kinds of charges on both sides that the Russian operatives are involved in eastern Ukraine, and they probably are. That the U.S. is involved. That the U.S. basically started all this by a coup that happened during the Winter Olympics that were going on in Sochi, Russia, and that this has all the earmarks of a growing, increasing, worsening, violent crisis. Russia has said if it gets too violent, and if the government of Ukraine, which was, as I said, installed by a coup, if they get heavy-handed, we're going to go in. Military option on the table. And there is no end in sight. They tried some peace talks in Geneva. Nothing. That ain't going to work. This is a supreme interest. It's on the Russian border. Supreme interest to Russia. I don't think they're going to walk away from this. They certainly didn't walk away in Crimea. This is getting worse, not better. Meanwhile, the government that was installed by a coup in Kiev is broke and is teetering on a major insolvency and a major problem. So guess what? The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is coming up with a bailout package. It's a 2-year deal, and where they're going to funnel money in, slowly, as they need it. And, the first, tranche that they're going to give them a loan is a couple of trillion, but it ain't dollars that they're talking about. The whole deal is worth about 17 billion US dollars, but that's not what the currency they're using. What am I getting at? And I suggest you go on the site under news from around the web and read this, that the IMF is using SDRs, Strategic Drawing Rights Currency, a SDR. And the SDRs are worth about 11 billion, while, the dollar is worth 17 billion. That's the dollar amount that they're going to be funneling in different, as the Ukrainian government needs it. SDRs. I can only speculate what that means to the U.S. dollar in the future as the world's reserve currency. Now, remember, the International Monetary Fund is headquartered in Washington, D.C. Are they tipping their hand as to what's coming down the road for the dollar? That the new world reserve currency is not going to be dollars, it's going to be SDRs. That's one of the things that Jim Rickards, who wrote the book The Death of Money, he was on this site talking about, could be SDRs. And they've been used in the past. It's been a long time since they used SDRs, but that's the bailout package. SDR currency. I do not think that is good news for the future of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. And that could really cause major problems for standard of living of Americans, for the standard of living of Americans. There's without question, it could. Well, I told you last week that, the situation between the Palestinian Authority and the Israelis, the negotiation, for the Palestinians to have their own state between them and the Israelis wasn't going well. And I said it isn't going well at all, and the talks broke down, and keep an eye on this. This is only going to get worse. I had no idea in my wildest dream the person that would make it worse the following week would be John Kerry, the U.S. Secretary of State. He made it worse by comparing Israel to an apartheid, which is preposterous, outrageous. Israel is not using the Palestinians as slave labor. It's unbelievable that he made this comment, and he made this comment because Hamas, which is in Gaza, which has been routinely firing rockets into Israel, and also on some fronts is a terror organization known as a terror group. I think the United States considers them a terror group. Hamas basically made up with the Palestinian Authority, and they're basically in the Palestinian section that they're trying to negotiate for their own state, the Palestinians' own state. Well, they made up. They will not recognize Israel's right to exist. As a matter of fact, they want to wipe them out. That's their goal. And now they have made up with the Palestinian Authority, the PA, and of course that's why Israel said, we're not going to negotiate with people that don't even, we got to get that out of the way, that we have a right to exist, otherwise there's no sense in negotiating, and you just, buckled up with the most anti-Israel faction of the Palestinian, organization, which is Hamas. So, and what did John Kerry say? Compared Israel to an apartheid. This is our number one diplomat. What did he think he was going to gain by that? He says, well, I wouldn't have used the correct word. He never apologized for it, either did Barack Obama. Outrageous. That is not helping the peace process. And when people aren't talking, they have a propensity to start shooting. And that is no good for the Palestinians, and that's no good for the Israelis either. There really needs to be a two-state solution, but that is nowhere in sight. That is not being worked out at all at this point. Keep your eye on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. It will continue to be a big issue in the Middle East. Well, according to the World Bank, China's poised to become the number one economy in the world by some metrics. Any surprise that would happen, being our fearless leaders decided to take all of our manufacturing overseas and make it more, desirable to be in overseas countries. A lot of that manufacturing went into China. Do you think that there any surprise that China would become the number one economy? And this is how you really grow wealth. It isn't about printing money. It isn't about raising the minimum wage to 10.10. Stupid. Your job's not a social program. It's about creating things. It's about investment. It's about building factories. It's about innovation. Those are the things that create wealth, create jobs, opportunity. That's what needs to happen. And this is the Democrats' big platform, which is basically just to make the Republicans look bad, in Congress, is that, you won't raise the minimum wage. I mean, that's it? That's your investment plan? To raise the minimum wage? That's what you got? Really? That's unbelievable. Meanwhile, the economy grew at 0.1%. That's not a misprint. In the first quarter of 2014, 0.1%. But don't worry, it was about the weather. It was about the weather. Oh, things are surging now. 0.1%. And if you take a look just quarter to quarter, fourth quarter, first quarter. The fourth quarter was supposedly 2.6%. I don't really believe any of the government numbers, but this is the best they can make it look. 0.1%, down from 2.6% in the fourth quarter down to 0.1%. And it's the weather. Don't worry, it's the weather. I've been saying from the very beginning, that we do not have a real recovery. Oh, yes, stock market's at all-time highs. But we do not have a real recovery. And why would the stock market hit all-time highs if we had 0.1% growth in the first quarter? According to my friend Gregory Mannarino at TradersChoice.net, he says, well, it's because everybody knows the fix is in. The Fed's going to print money. They're going to have easy money policies. Going to have 0% interest rates. They're going to have QE. And he said, oh, and by the way, they haven't tapered. They haven't cut back on the QE. They're still printing money to buy bonds. And he says, and here is why I know it, because if they cut back on buying bonds and put these bonds out and let people bid on them, interest rates would rise. Bond prices would fall. Stock prices would fall. There is no taper, according to Greg Mannarino. He says they are going to do everything they can, the Fed, to keep this propped up, especially in an election year. He says, but listen, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this thing crashes, and it will crash, according to Gregory Mannarino, who I'm going to have on real soon. And finally, one last thing I want to talk to you about, and I don't generally get into issues like this, this Donald Sterling, him bounced out of the NBA. He's the owner of the Clippers, and he got tossed out because he made these repugnant, racist statements. Totally racist, repugnant statements. And I got to tell you that I'm worried about the slippery slope. The slippery slope of attacking First Amendment speech. Listen, this is repugnant. These are repugnant comments. But Mark Cuban, owner of the Spurs, who's no racist, he was worried about this being a slippery slope, making somebody sell their team because of what they said inside their own home. As repugnant as it is, it's still a First Amendment issue. I'll tell you my little First Amendment story. I had a news director in the early 90s, and they were having a Klan rally in, I think, Lexington, North Carolina. They don't have that here anymore. That doesn't happen here anymore. But Lexington, North Carolina, early 90s. And he wanted to send me down to cover this Klan rally. And there are black people lining the streets, and these white people going down the middle, hollering out the ugliest things. There was no fights, no cans, no guns, no shooting. But it was ugly. It was repugnant. I told my news director, I don't want to go. You don't want to go? I said, no, I don't believe in a word that these Klan people say. They're gross. I don't want to. Oh, you don't want to go? I said, no. Please don't make me go. Oh, no. You're going to go. My news director said this. He says, you need to get a upfront and personal lesson on the First Amendment. And he said, the First Amendment protects speech you hate, not speech you love. And I went and covered this rally, and it was repugnant, and it was ugly, and I don't believe in a word that the Klan says. But after that, I thought, well, I don't believe in a word they say, but I believe in their right to say it. And that's the slippery slope. For example, you work for a company, and you're pro-abortion. Oh, we're not, so you're fired. Or you're pro-abortion. You're against abortion. Oh, well, you're fired. Oh, you hate illegal immigrants. Well, you're fired. Or you're for illegal immigrants. Well, you work for a company. Well, you're fired. You understand what I'm talking about? The slippery slope. That you could get into a slippery slope. Thought police. Got to say the right. We all have to say the right thing. No. Listen, people that can go there and protest the Clippers. That's all. The First Amendment protected speech. They don't have to buy their tickets. But making this guy sell this team, as Mark Cuban said, it's a slippery slope. Thank you so much for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments. I have the smartest people on the internet, and your donations. I appreciate it. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Have a nice weekend.